Hello, everybody. We're going to work on Unit 6, Exercise 1 here tonight. And we did get a head start on this during the last class session, but I'm going to kind of review what we did during the last class session and then show you the last piece, which was, I think, completing the charts, basically. The first thing is we're supposed to open up the starter spreadsheet, which we did, and I have that open in the background here. Calculate the average, lowest, and highest expenditures on the expenditures and detail tab. Create a bar chart for the expenditures for each department per quarter on the expenditures tab, and a pie chart of the percent spent for each department on its own tab. All right. We're supposed to follow the instructions in the attached PDF, which I have right here. So let's just go ahead and get the spreadsheet up on the screen. And once again, I always think, the best place to start when you're working with data is to examine your data. Like what is going on with the data? Like what is the information inside here? Some of the things that we did, if I remember correctly, because it was a little while ago, is we were trying to make sure that all of these sums were calculating correctly, right? And all of these sums were calculating correctly. And then we also kind of showed how to calculate an average, lowest and highest expenditures. And instead of manually writing the formulas, also show you that there are tools built into Excel that kind of automatically do that. You can just grab them, throw them in, tweak the ranges that we're talking about. So the real key here is like when you're doing a sum is to sum the right numbers, right? And so all of these rows basically repeat. So if you get the one row correct, your sum is correct. Same thing about going the other direction, right? So that's a sum of the column above. And then we were also looking at this percent of expenditures. And with this one, all of them are relative to the grand total. So cell F11, you can see, is locked in there with the dollar sign. So that's part of every one of these formulas here. If you look up at the formula bars, I kind of switch from field to field. All right. So that calculation then would yield a number between 0 and 1 that we then use the percentage key to trigger into the percent format. And then we displayed it to one decimal place, which I feel is accurate enough. Right. All right. The bottom part of the spreadsheet here, where we did the average, the min, and the max, the key there was once again setting up the right ranges. Each one of these formulas is going to utilize the same range of numbers, and it's just a matter of making sure that it's doing it correctly. Once you have these in place, the formulas within here are relative. So that means when I copy them, and I can use that little square in the bottom corner of the cell and drag it across. If you set up your formulas right and all your formulas are organized and all your data is organized really well, it's really easy to copy those formulas, either horizontally or vertically. And I think you guys are getting the hang of that now. So these are all the values. Then we were asked to create a bar chart, and we did this last time and we kind of ran out of time. I just took one of the suggested ones, if I remember right. And this one's kind of neat because it does show by department and the amounts of expenditures. I only have one little quip with this one. And here's my issue with this one. Almost all of the data is visible except for the city development area here. I can't see the last piece of data because of the format of this chart. These taller bars here interfere with the visibility of the bar that's hiding behind this green one, right? So I would call that not good. So even though this is a nice looking chart and you might go, this is pretty useful, it is obscuring one piece of information. It's the only piece of information I can't see. And real frankly, this three-dimensional view doesn't necessarily translate well to the data points on the side here because they're trying to create a two-dimensional drawing of a three-dimensional space, and it's really easy to kind of fall in the wrong ranges. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to remove this bar chart. I'm going to do a fresh one, right? And the ask is again to create a bar chart displaying the expenditures for each department per quarter on the expenditures tab. So what that says to me is all of the departments per quarter, right? So you see how I like kind of talked myself through that and highlighted just the information I need to chart. Does it matter if I'm using the percentages right now or the totals? Not for what I was asked for. We just want to see what each department is spending by quarter. Let's go ahead and now that we have the data highlighted, choose the insert menu, and you could go right to recommended charts. However, we are told that it should probably be a bar chart. And I want you to notice that since we know what type we want, I can just go to that little menu item here in the ribbon bar, and I can choose from all these different formats. These are probably the most common ones that you see here. And while it's tempting to do a 3D one, I think I'm going to stick with what the instructions kind of show in here, where they have a multicolor side-by-side one, because, and here's why I'm going to choose this, because it's really easy to see which color refers to which quarter and which department it goes to. It's very, very clear. All right, so I'm going to go ahead, go back to the spreadsheet here. I'm going to choose one of the two-dimensional models. And in fact, that first one looks pretty darn good. And you know what? When I look at these stacked ones, well, these are kind of neat too. But for me, if I'm looking at what that actual dollar amount is, this one to me is more clear. So this is the one that I'm going to go for. Now, some of this is very subjective. If you don't agree with that one is more clear, you can choose one of the other ones. But for me, when I look at, let's say we look at this entry here for legislative, you can tell that as the quarters went on, first, second, third, fourth, the color coding is very clear. You can see that they kept spending more money. They never cleared $500,000, but clearly fourth quarter was, more spending. I don't know how much more, it doesn't say exactly here, but notice if I hover, did you guys catch that about these charts? It gives you the data. It tells you how much it was, 377,000. Now, that's pretty helpful because what Excel is doing is it's giving you a data feed from the data to the visualization. And as we hover over a piece of it, it's giving you the data point that generated it. So this is useful, right? Who knew it was so interactive in Excel, right? Now, if you're just showing this up, let's say you're putting this up on a PowerPoint slide and people are just looking at it on the screen, they wouldn't be able to do that. But somebody that's looking at your report in Excel, or if you output it from here into Power BI, for example, those data points come alive, right, with interactivity. And so you can get very specific amounts. Of course, the big anomalous piece of data on this chart is the capital projects in the fourth quarter here, right? Everything else is either kind of the same, going up just a little bit of variance, but all basically in the same range as you would expect by any organization that has a budget for whatever they're doing. But this is an anomaly because they must have had some sort of a, transfer of funds, and I think that's what we figured out, that caused that huge spike, like off the charts, right, compared to their other expenditures. So I like this view. It's very clear. The data is easy to make sense of. And then when you add the interactivity piece and you can see what the dollar amounts are, even more valuable. All right. Let's go on to the next thing then, which is to do a pie chart. And I want you to see here what it says. Create a pie chart of the percentage spent for each department on its own tab. This is a different ask. It's not asking by quarter. So this must be for the whole year. And we did create a column that had a percentage in it. So we're going to use that piece of information. And I want you to notice here, yeah, I could include totals and dollar amounts, but all they're looking at here is what is the percentage spent by department. So let's see if we can create that very simply. So like when you start to think about those pieces of information that are being asked for in the visual, they're asking for what? The department. So I'm highlighting all that, including the header. And then I'm going to hold down my control key, and then I'm going to highlight this data, which is the percent of expenditures. That's all I need for the pie chart. Some of you may have tried to pie chart the whole thing, right? I'm not sure, but this is really the correct way to do it. So now I'm going to go ahead and do an insert. We are told that we need a pie chart. So once again, I'll hit the little drop down. Hey, there's a 3D one. Oh my God, that looks almost just like the PDF, right? Almost. Right. So I'm just going to go ahead and click that. Yeah, it's hovering over my data right now, but we're going to tweak it. Notice they have color keys at the bottom, and apparently these are the percentages, but what is missing is the actual percentage. So can you adjust this so that you can see the percentages? And this is where you start to explore some of these tools here on the side, right? And notice, like, if I hover, it says add, remove, or change chart elements such as title, legend, grid lines, and data labels. Choose your color scheme here. And then there's also filters. And some of this stuff is kind of interesting because notice as I kind of start to hover over it, it allows me to kind of look at each individual slice. So if I want it, I can like deselect them and then individually add stuff in, you know, weird stuff like that. Of course, we do want all of them, right? We also have like what information is available here in the chart. So for example, they're attaching it to data, right? And, you know, it says percent of expenditures. They're telling you where the data is coming from, right? And this is stuff that maybe you looked at, maybe you did not. When we do the other scatter plot thing, we are going to play with this interface, which is a little bit more complicated, but this is kind of like the backbone of where the data is coming from. They're really only looking at one data column. That's it, just a percent of expenditures. Now, in terms of what this looks like, this is where we can do a little bit of working with some of the tools in Excel to kind of add labels to the graphics. And one thing that you can do is you can do a formatting, right? And so you can, for example, you know, adjust, you know, the rotation if you wish, or pull the pie apart. You know, it's just like really goofy little stuff like that. Gets pretty particular. Also, if you are looking at like the color, even add some drop shadows or whatever, you can do all that kind of stuff here. The other aspect is also like the actual labels that we put on the chart itself. I'm going to pause the recording here for just a second and just ask a really quick, right? And so like some of you notice right away that we're working with one of the styles for 3D charts, but there's also kind of like the style palette up here, right? That has like preset stuff, right? And some of these look pretty nice. I mean, that's a pretty nice looking graphic. I mean, somebody took some time to build that. And I really don't necessarily need to mechanically go in there and do any of the work. And I, you know, as I go through here, and I just want to show you that there's even more, and not all of them I think look good, by the way. But I do think this one looks okay-ish, right? Because it does what we want. The explanations are kind of color coded. They're adjacent to the graphic. They're not overlapping the graphic or hard to read. But as you look at any of the little pieces on a chart like this, what I do want you to notice is that you can go in there, and these are all objects like in a graphic, and you can go in there and manipulate each one. So if I want to move it over just a little bit or change the font color or whatever I want to do, I don't like that font, I like this font, it's all available, right? Um, but part of working with um, this, and Susan, you were starting to bring up, working with the filters. And if I control Z my way out of here, and you can see I'm getting the chart back to where I had it. And I know this is off the side of the screen, but I am control Zing all the way out to here. How would I add the percentages and labels mechanically or manually? Does anybody have the answer to that? Rather than using the style palette. Nobody.
Quick layout, maybe?
All right. So it took a little bit for us to identify it, but Christina, you actually did a great job of pointing that out. So right here, as you look at the little plus sign next to the chart, you'll notice a lot of us, will notice the check boxes here, but they don't notice necessarily the little expanders, right? And so like, notice like if I start, choosing the various options. So like this one's actually not bad because it does point out all the different pies, right? So this might be an option, or you can go in here and you can start to, um, play with how the stuff appears within here. And I'm still not seeing it. Must be clicking on the wrong thing. Oh, I see. Okay. One more time. And see, in this case, I'm not sure if you guys can see that, but they have one data label there, and you can change its position, and you see what I'm doing here. I think generally speaking, for what we're trying to do here, though, and you could use the automatic styling or maybe something as simple as the data callout. Now, for whatever reason, mine is focusing on just that one piece of data that I don't want it to. So you can see I'm doing a control Z here on the whole thing. And so I did something in my data. I think that was the spot right there that made me focus on just that one piece of information. So still, all right, let's leave it there. Let's try it from here. Okay, so there's all the data labels, and then place them all on the outside. All right. So I would accept this is a solution, or if you wish, it might be best on a separate tab. And what I do want to show you guys is you can take the whole thing, you can cut it and just move it to a different sheet if that's like your goal, or put it in a PowerPoint or whatever it is. And if you don't like this design, using one of the pre-built ones isn't necessarily bad. It's just it's very subjective. But let's just call this one of the solutions. The ideal would be that you're labeling each one and the percentage is clear in the graphic. All right. So let's just pause here for just a moment. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and close this spreadsheet. And actually, before I close it, I'm going to save as, and notice how I label mine because this one is solved. So I'm in parentheses here. I'm going to say solved. And we'll say final. And this is a spring of 25. So Let's save it with that in the name also. All right, let's move on to the next exercise. The next exercise is a little bit different in that we have a data set that's provided. It's actually a pretty large data set that's 0.5 MB in size. That's plain text. We're going to import that data. It's 10,001 records, by the way. And then we're going to create a scatter plot that hopefully looks like this one, right? And the challenge is creating that scatter plot and not something else. So let's go ahead and I do want you to notice there's no document giving you a step-by-step here, and there's no starter spreadsheet, right, with data already in it. So you have two choices on how you proceed with this. One choice is I can download and open that CSV file directly. That will open up an Excel on my system. CSV is attributed to Excel. But if I try to create charts inside of it, it won't allow me because CSV is just for text. It's not for graphics, where Excel file format would work. The other approach is to create a new spreadsheet, import the data, and work with it that way. Now, if you ask me which approach would I take, I know that a CSV file will open up in Excel, so I would just basically download this and then open it directly in Excel. That's what I would do. So is the data imported? Yep, it's imported. Yeah, totally. Is there a disadvantage to doing it this way? There is one disadvantage. With the import tool, and we've seen this, if the data set is not a good data set, so in other words, there's blank entries or missing information or anomalous data, like there's words where there should be numbers, the import tool would spot that and filter that stuff out. This approach, we're just brute force opening the file. Well, now, we got to kind of look through here and make sure all the data is okay. And I don't know if you guys are catching this, right? But if it's 10,000 entries, check out the row numbers, right? As they go up, it's very hard to kind of scroll through here and look at every row and go, yeah, it's all fine. Right. But really that's what you should do. You should really look at all your data, and you see I'm kind of doing it pretty fast, and I don't see any blank entries or words where there should be numbers. And I keep clicking here, and I'm still on row 8,000, trying to go up, right? So not really super efficient. So I'm holding down on the scroll bar right now with my mouse button, and I'm just kind of staring at the data as it's flashing by the screen to see if I spot any blanks as it goes by. I didn't, so I'm just going to assume all the data is okay. That might not be a safe assumption. Now, once again, the difference of like creating a new spreadsheet first and then doing an import is you can use the import tool and you can filter out any blank lines, if any, or maybe spot anomalous data. All right, we're going to assume the data set is okay. So we're just going to roll with it as is. The other thing to do is once you get the data in, you need to look at the data and try to make a determination of what it is and how it's organized. Well, we can see that there's 3 columns. There's gender, height, and weight, right? What number is the height? What is, like, for example, what does this represent? Centimeters? Inches, I'm assuming, right? Seems like a fair guess, right? So that is somebody's height in inches. And then the next one over, we're assuming is weight in pounds, because it certainly couldn't be kilograms, right? Because we'd multiply it by 2.2 to get pounds. So that's what I'm assuming. Height in inches, weight in pounds, right? Right. So we're making an extrapolation here, but I think I'm fairly correct. The other thing that I see that in the first column, all the data for all the males in the data set continue all the way down to line 5001. And I'm looking at that on purpose because from there on in, it's all females, and somebody pre-sorted this information by gender is basically what I'm discovering. But as I find where one grouping ends and the other begins, the values in these cells are important because here's the why. When I set up a formula or I want to grab some information for a chart, the last thing I want to do is grab the data and go like this until I get to line 5,000, right? Highly inefficient. You just be sitting there for 5 minutes. It's not a smart way to work. Yeah, you could do that, but you would find yourself like your mouse finger would get tired after a while waiting for the scroll to stop because it only scrolls like 10 or 20 things at a time. And you need to be able to move faster than that. One strategy would be you can start at the top of your data set and then move your cursor down to the right line number like this, and then holding the shift key, hit the last piece of data I want, which is that one. That's another approach. So all the data is now highlighted for males, not for females. And for females, we go from row 5,002 all the way down to 10,001. All right, so that information is important. So let's figure out here, without selecting any data, how to insert a scatter plot. Once again, we know the kind of chart that we're going to insert, and you'll notice that they have, a category here for regular scatter plot. So I'm going to go ahead and click the little down arrow here, and this is kind of what we're looking for. And for most of us, when we ran this, we probably got this as a result. Right. So if this is what you got as a result, you didn't do anything wrong except you didn't adjust the right settings. And this is where this one is a little tricky because how is it organizing the data? Well, it's kind of in a way, it's ignoring sort of gender in this data set. And I don't know what these numbers are down here at the bottom. Is this okay? Well, these make sense. These must be weight, right? Because most people are between 50 to 300 pounds, I would think. But what are these numbers? Well, this is a count of the number. We know we have 10,000 lines of data, right? So this is counting how many people are of a certain weight and how many people are of a certain height. It's putting weight and height on the same axis. Not useful, right? And I'm assuming the orange data set that's higher is the males and the one that's lower is the females. In fact, we know that's how the data is organized, and that would seem to make sense. However, this is not what we're shooting for here. So what we need to do then is we need to change how the data is put into the chart. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to move the chart over and go into this mode here. So I'm going to click the little filter thing at the bottom. I'm going to click the select data source tool. And even though it's appealing to have height and weight here, I'm actually going to remove both of those. And we're going to rebuild the chart from inside this tool. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to chart males in one color and females in a different color. And I'm going to put two different directives in the select data source tool to do that. So here it says chart data range, and I'm going to hit the little up arrow here, which basically collapses the box so I can access my spreadsheet. And what I'm going to do then is I'm going to highlight all the data for males. And here's that scroll problem again. So I'm just going to kind of stop right here. I know this goes all the way up to row 5,001, right? So I'm just going to tweak that last number manually, and then I'm just going to press enter. All right. Now, I probably should not have selected the first column. It's kind of what I'm thinking on this. But right now I can't even see the results of this because, well, that still doesn't look right, right? Well, I can get rid of one of these. Get rid of the other one. Yeah, this is not what I want. All right, so let's cancel that again. Let's go back in, select the data. We'll just actually remove both of those, and we're gonna add a new series name. So this is kind of the trick for how you do this. So you click the add button, and I'm gonna call this the mail data. This is just a name, by the way. And then I'm gonna give it a range. So now it wants me to select on the spreadsheet. And really, I'm only interested in the height and weight. I'm not interested in the label, right? That's irrelevant. So once again, I'm just going to select part of it. I know where my data range ends. So here I'm going to type 5001 and press enter. Okay. And then what is the series X value? So what do I want on the bottom? Do I want height or weight? And I think on the bottom, I'm probably going to choose height, right? So it would be this column. Once again, I'm going to go all the way down to 5001. And then for the Y value, we'll choose the weight. And once again, I'm not going to select all of it, just some of it. And I'm going to go down to 5001. And there's my data. Okay, this is a little more promising. Now, keep in mind, that's 5,000 data points all in a blob in a little part of my chart. I will adjust the chart later so that it's a little bit easier to see. But I would say that this is okay because that's kind of working, right? And it's kind of looking like what we have. Let's go ahead and add another series here for female, right? And then we're going to select the range again, and I'm just going to start, and then I'm going to tweak my numbers, and I'm like, wait a second, this isn't even close to right, right? No, it's not. In fact, let's backtrack here and select again. And I'm going to go way down the chart. I know where I need to go to, right? Because I've looked at my data before. And so we're going to start here on row 5002. And I'm just going to start highlighting. And I know this goes down to row 10,001. So 10001. And then we'll select the X values, which also go to 10,001. And then the Y values, which also go to 10,001. And we'll say okay. Then I'm going to say okay again. And it worked. Except we can't see it because it's way at the top of the document. So we're up there, and there you go. So there's our data set in all of its glory. Right. It still looks a little bit different than what I have here, where this is a lot easier to look at. And I don't know if you're noticing what the difference is, but I'm trimming away parts of the graph where there's no data. And I'm starting at a certain range here, and it looks like I'm starting at 50 on both scales and then scaling it up to where there's data points. So in other words, I don't have to show like all this part of the chart. I mean, this is irrelevant. There's no data here, right? So you can, by the way, click into the chart. And I'm going to start by just making the chart a lot bigger. Right, so let's do that. And I'm messing with it a little bit here. And then there's different types of adjustments I can make to the chart. And, you know, what I just did to it was probably not good. So I'm going to Control Z. Let's go back there. All right. And I'm going to do this. All right. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click into the chart here. And once you're inside the chart, and I'm trying to get into the format mode here. There we go. So you saw how I did that is I right-clicked the chart. I said format chart area, and then I'm able to click on each one of the axes here to do an adjustment. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight the one, I'm going to right click, and it's kind of blocking me a little bit here. And I don't know if you guys are picking up on how finicky this can be. There we go. And so once you have it highlighted, you can come here to the right sidebar and notice under access options, I can set the top and bottom points of the chart. So from a height standpoint, it's like nobody's taller than 90 inches. In fact, nobody's taller than 80 inches and nobody's less than 50. So I could go, for example, from 50 to 80. Right, so notice the range is shrunk down. And then I can do the same thing here. And once again, I'll start at 50. Why? Because there's no data there. And I think 300 is a reasonable spot to stop. And there you go. Now I do have a scatter plot type that's got lines built into it, but you can see how much closer I am to the graphic that's on the assignment description. Of course, you can come in here and you can style the actual chart pieces, right? Like, so for example, we can choose different formats. Okay, so now I'm making Excel crash here. I'm going to wait for the program to respond. I think I'm pushing the memory on my computer a bit much here with the recording. You just have to wait. I do not want to restart and lose my work. This looks great in a recording, by the way. All right, well, since Excel crashed on me, I'm going to go ahead and repeat these steps here. So I have a little bit of data selected. I'm going to click on recommended charts this time, and I see a scatter plot right up at the top here. So I'm just going to go with that. And then I'm just going to adjust this. So I'm going to use the little filter tool here, go in here and select data. And then I'm going to adjust this data set here. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to remove it and just build it from scratch. And so we're going to give this a name, and we'll call it male. And then we'll select the range, which is going to be, well, we'll start with this data range, but as we predetermined, right, row 5001. And then our X series values will be height. Once again, all the way to 5001. Yeah, something, I wrote something in the formula there. Let's try that again. And I guess what I'm going to do is back out of here just momentarily because I have a lot of stuff already kind of plotted in there. So let's try that action one more time. So selecting the range here to start the range, and I'm going to tweak it. I must have deleted the $sign last time, is what I'm guessing. And actually, I did that incorrectly. Let's try that one more time. I'm just going to erase this and retype it. And then we'll type the rest manually. The X series all the way down to 5001. The Y series. And that looks better. Now we'll add one for female. It's going to be all of this stuff. And actually, we want to start, and this is where we can do this manually here. You want to start at row 5,002 and go down to row 10,001. And let's poise ourselves for the next selection here. Let's just move down there. All right. So when we do the X series, we'll start right here. We'll take it down to 10,001. And then we'll do the Y series starting there and down to 10,001. Okay. And now we're going to plot both the charts way up at the top. Make it a little bit bigger. And then, of course, what I was asking that everybody does is to also format the axis points here. And it seems like if you click right on one of the values in there, that's how you get it to show. And I'm just going to set the starting point for both the X and the Y to 50. I mean, even just that looks better, right? But let's do the same over here for the Y axis. And once again, we'll have a starting point of 50. And then you can start like to play with some of the way that the other stuff looks in here if you wish. Like if you want like different dot types, for example, you could select that. But I think this is a pretty good view of the data. I think when I did it before, and I was just looking at the dot styles, like if you click through here, there's like squares and circles and ones with shadows and weird little features to them. I probably went with something like that. And this is very, very subjective. Keep in mind that like when you're looking at these data sets here, you can come into these filters and you can like deselect the stuff and then look at one set of data at a time, turn on the other set of data, turn off the other set of data, and just really kind of dig into it and explore it. All right, so we'll call that the solution. I would probably suggest that you label your axes too, but I think this is a pretty good visualization considering 10,000 data points. But you notice how there's a really high correlation between height and weight. It's a very clear trend line on this. It's highly correlated. You're taller, you tend to weigh more, just as a general rule. All right. This recording is done here.